Hi, for the purpose of making this video today, I've using this absolutely beautiful video that's been uploaded by Soothing Relaxation. Beautiful relaxing music, Norway's nature, violin music, flute music, piano and harp music, and I'll leave the link to it underneath this video. And you know, I really appreciate the people that make videos like this, and there's a variety of them on YouTube, and I play them regularly because it is so important that humanity reconnects with the natural world, the natural environment and the natural universe that has so astoundingly created this amazing, beautiful planet, which really is like a lucid dream, you know, an oasis of a lucid dream in the vastness of space, you know, which itself, space, is an equally an amazing, wonderful entity that can hold a living planet and the stars and just everything that contributes to life. So, you know, I would advise that people watch these videos regularly and reconnect with the splendour of our planet, because our planet is right now at risk, and that is one of the reasons why people like myself make our videos, you know, and inform the public, which is what I'm going to do in this video. So I hope that Soothing Relaxation do not mind me using their video as a backdrop to information that I'm going to share, which is in the interest of public information, of providing public information, and is also for non-profit purposes. None of my videos are monetized, and I don't ask for any donations for my work. I'm not criticising the people that do, because I know a lot of those people just, you know, because they are so moved to address the issues, they need some means to live. I'm just fortunate that the work I do as a carer does give me ample time and at minimal expense to make these videos and to, you know, do the work that I do. There are also a lot of people who are forced into exile and as a result have no means of sustaining themselves, and they do, but not, and directly because of what they're exposing, and they do need our full support. So that said, this particular video is going to be addressing YouTube, and I hope that YouTube themselves will pay attention to what is shared here, because the points that I'm going to make are very important, and you know, the public especially needs to get wise now as well. So I'm going to get this information up, because usually my videos are just ad-lib and I share information by way of showing various links and whatever, but sometimes, because the information is so important and it needs to be very clear and explained very clearly too, I do write down what needs to be said, and so people can then also read it, if, you know, they can go back, they can turn my voice off and just read it, you know. So I'm just going to get this up now. I'll have to play the video and get this up. So, YouTube, friend or foe? Due to my own and others' recent experiences directly through our connections with YouTube, I'm disturbed to discover a severe imbalance of thought behind present YouTube and other authority approaches in terms of defining who and what may be deemed offensive and or criminal. To those ends, I've shared here a few ideas and points of law on a host of issues which I hope will be of help to both YouTube and its users. New rules for new technologies. Freedom of speech and expression are a human right, and internet media platforms like YouTube appear to uphold that right, albeit with certain limitations, i.e. copyright infringement, etc. YouTube accepts no responsibility for impact of video content on viewers other than to remove any offensive videos as in breach of their standards, and in certain cases closing individual accounts. Being as YouTube has no capacity to monitor every video uploaded, they rely largely on public complaints to alert them to criminal or rogue content. Sometimes, infringement rules are punitively employed to remove educational and information videos which, despite presenting a fair and balanced perspective based on facts and evidence, are cited by a complainant as in breach, and only because they expose corporate or political corruption or other high-profile crimes. Bodies like, e.g. the BBC, can be quite discriminatory about which videos sharing BBC content they choose to query. Invariably, only videos judged anti-establishment will be removed via BBC copyright infringement. Despite the loosely applied standards, YouTube is full of all kinds of offensive content at any given time, with responsibility for monitoring left generally to public awareness and millions of people uploading and re-uploading at every second of each day. It is a seemingly impossible task for YouTube to prevent offensive uploads, and therefore it is lawfully accepted they cannot be held liable for video content, and indeed it is argued that without freedom from liability, YouTube could not exist. As with all aspects of relatively new technology and communications advances, new crimes, risks and levels of exploitation of users and content emerge. We cannot forget that in case of YouTube, likes, dislikes, shares, subscriptions and comments are an important element of content too, and those extras equally contribute in relation to video content. One of the new developments involves YouTubers finding themselves arrested and charged, even imprisoned, often with police holding warrants to search homes, seize computers and cell phones. Their crimes is that they upload or shared an offensive YouTube video. Since people commonly believe that YouTube videos can be lawfully freely shared, being as they're on a public platform, the share buttons directly connecting to Facebook, Twitter, etc. underneath every video can be construed as a form of entrapment, whereby innocent people are suffering prosecution because they have effectively been invited by YouTube to share videos later judged offensive. Often, an offensive video remains on a variety of YouTube accounts, even after the individual sharer has been prosecuted. In such cases, prosecution is punitive and discriminatory against individuals, because they are singled out for punishment as being responsible for any damages the offending share is said to have caused, when in fact the damage is ongoing, because the video remains available on YouTube, and as fast as YouTube gets it taken down, it is instantly re-uploaded by others. If individuals sharing an offensive YouTube video can be prosecuted for the resulting damages, why not also YouTube itself? The problem also revolves about what can be considered offensive to the degree that offence can be lawfully subject to, e.g. limitations on human rights of free speech and expression. Generally, limitations on freedom of speech and expression are justified by data protection, privacy, public and individual protection, anti-terrorism, property libel, slander, perjury, criminal incitement and hate crime laws. A video targeting radical groups providing information about how to make a homemade bomb, or a video promoting child pornography are obvious candidates for removal and prosecution. Unfortunately, those same limitations and associated prosecutions are being applied to uploads presenting valid facts, concerns and evidence which directly relate to public interest. Human rights are established precisely to protect public health and safety. Therefore, by their very nature of existence, those rights cannot permit any limitations which effectively inhibit or threaten, i.e., public health and safety. The Golden Rule. According to the Golden Rule of law, it is accepted that interpretations of the law can never be applied if those interpretations actually undermine the original intent of the law to such a degree those interpretations incite obnoxious results and/or results that contravene public policy. Limitations on freedom of speech and expression need to ensure that the results of those limitations do not contravene the original intent of that particular right. The original intent of freedom of speech and expression is to facilitate and support the concept of democracy and equality. No one is to fear speaking out against, e.g., corrupt authorities, or else toward exposing severe health and safety risks. Against the general public. Generally, evidence of criminal activity will override limitations on human rights, because to limit those rights for purpose of protecting a lawfully suspected criminal is to ignore the Golden Rule of law. The basic principle of human rights is to protect and defend innocent persons from crime, from criminals and criminal activity. Ordinarily, citizens of democratic nations which uphold human rights have recourse of various authorities to whom crimes can be reported and then addressed. However, increasingly citizens are discovering evidence of crimes which regular authorities refuse to address, and often due to the fact that the crimes involve government ministers or a large corporation, police, councils or other national authorities. Nonetheless, the evidence and crimes are real. The public is at risk. In such circumstances as regular authority ignorance in face of lawfully evidenced crimes and/or professional negligence that has placed, i.e., children at risk, YouTube is a popular outlet, allowing people to inform and alert the public and simultaneously to request greater public interest and action. Even so, some unscrupulous individuals will seize on all such information and use it to covertly or overtly promote other agendas which run counter to the premise of why the crimes are exposed in the first place. E.g., crimes against children are exposed to promote an underlying anti-human rights agenda. Naturally, the issue of video content prohibition is complex because human thought, opinion and activity is complex and a vast diversity of interests and objectives exist. Our guide therefore resides primarily on the function of human rights and the Golden Rule of law that serves to ensure any limitations do not run counter to their original intent. Indeed, without human rights of freedom of speech and expression, YouTube would have been denied from its conception. According to the legal framework as previously established via human rights and the Golden Rule, a YouTube video sharing some BBC content specifically for purpose of alerting the public to criminal activity by the BBC, which regular authorities have refused to address, any limitations on human rights are unlawfully applied because the BBC has a powerful influence on the public, and a misinformed, deceived public are at risk from those powers which have employed the BBC to misinform and deceive them, and/or those who directly benefit from the resulting lack of authority attention. Exposing corruption and criminals. In event of a regular authority ignorance or refusal to act, YouTube becomes a public court for exposing evidence, concerns and risks. It is often necessary that statements are evidenced via actual footage from the BBC, etc. Use of YouTube for purpose of promoting public awareness, health and safety is a legitimate and is perhaps the most altruistic use of that platform, in the sense a video is fully utilising and upholding human rights, while simultaneously alerting the public to those actively working against them. A prime example is the case of Ken O'Keefe, who uploaded a video exposing BBC bias, lies and anti-human rights agendas. he shared evidence to support his statements via a few BBC news clips. The BBC complained about breach of copyright to YouTube, and subsequently Ken O'Keefe's video was taken down. However, human rights to freedom of speech and expression are designed to override an issue of copyright if that copyright means the public are left misinformed and at a lawfully identified risk. Limitations can only apply in circumstances where freedom of speech and expression run counter to the original intent and instead place the public in danger. E.g., a video showing radical Muslims committing atrocities and thereby inciting the public to commit criminal acts against all Muslims on strength of evidence exampled by a minority extreme. Evidence and concerns around associated risk need always to be balanced, i.e., no one could reasonably promote the idea that every Christian supports the Ku Klux Klan, even though the Ku Klux Klan are a reality in this world and they do claim to be Christian. Similarly, no one could accurately claim every Jew is a Zionist or that every male is a misogynist. Ken O'Keefe provided a fair presentation of evidence balanced with rational concerns and promoting a reasonable response. He shares his lawful suspicion that the BBC has operated in a biased and criminal negligent manner, and as a direct result the public are at risk and criminals remain empowered. Therefore, in his case, YouTube are acting in ignorance of the Golden Rule when they decided to uphold the BBC's claim of copyright rules above Ken O'Keefe's rights of freedom of speech and expression, and most especially because copyright rules do permit fair usage for the purpose of public information and education. Since the BBC is directly funded by the public and is essentially a servant to the public, any concerns about the lawful validity of BBC content is of prime importance to public interest, and the public have a right to hear the evidence, and in fact it is for that exact purpose we have the benefit of freedom of speech and expression. Any discomfort experienced by the BBC as a result of Ken O'Keefe's videos is in fact directly related to their evidence crime and/or corruption. Exposing crimes can never be against the law, and most especially when those crimes leave the public at risk of severe harm. The more vulnerable those left at risk, so all the more important it is to share the evidence and expose the crimes. Rise of the sock puppet. Aforementioned points naturally lead to another important aspect of YouTube in relation to exactly who is holding any given YouTube account at any given time. Human rights can only apply to human beings. A cartoon character cannot be afforded human rights. Unfortunately, cartoon characters are prolific on YouTube, commonly known as sock puppet accounts. A single individual operating from an outsourced or encrypted IP address can control 100 plus YouTube accounts, which essentially represent fictional individuals. A real person with a single account cannot be 100 plus individuals who can make 100 plus individual comments, likes or dislikes. Individuals are thus outnumbered by sock puppets. Sock puppet accounts are employed for all kinds of abusive and criminal activity. Regularly, they are used to discredit or bully certain individuals deemed a threat to criminal or inhumane agendas. One individual can appear as multiple people who share the opinion that the target is crazy, a liar, or even spread malicious and libelous gossip based on outright lies. From behind the sock puppet, an individual may gangstalk and harass or even threaten the target in order to intimidate them into silence. This is just a quote from The New Scientist in relation to sock puppets. Coomer and his colleagues at the University of Maryland and Stanford University posted from the same IP address in the same discussion at similar times. This approach isn't always possible, so they wanted to develop a tool that automatically detects sock puppets based only on publicly accessible posting data. They found that Sock puppets contribute poorer quality content, writing shorter posts that are often downvoted or reported by other users. They post on more controversial topics, spend more time replying to other users, and are more abusive. Worryingly, their posts are also more likely to be read, and they are often central to their online communities, generating a lot of activity. And this is the link for that article on sock puppet accounts, which was published in the New Scientist. Although YouTube fundamentally relies on the notion of free speech and freedom of expression, nonetheless it has a duty of care to the public in order to ensure human rights are not being abused as a direct result of the unfettered freedoms their media platform provides. While we can accept the impossibility of YouTube's ability to regulate every video and comment or share, etc., we need to understand that by knowingly permitting sock puppet accounts, they are encouraging potentially criminal activity and granting human rights to fictitious characters who are invariably untraceable and therefore unaccountable. YouTube needs to operate on the basic principle that if someone has something of lawful value to share, then they need at least to put their name to it. While many may argue that they'll be placed at risk by putting their name to sharing of sensitive information incriminating a powerful body or person, the fact is, life is full of risks. If we dare not share the information under our own name, we are better to pass it on to someone who is in a safer position to do so, or else who has courage to accept those risks on behalf of upholding human rights to safeguarding, i.e. children, public identity and protection. YouTube is presently a law unto itself, and its sock puppet users, who, being untraceable, are free to upload whatever material they wish, and as soon as one sock puppet account is closed, it is easily replaced by another. In this way, fictitious characters are afforded a greater degrees of free speech and expression than factual individuals who are easily identified and just as easily held to account. To redress the balance and in interest of public health and safety, many suffered severe depression, loss of income and or breakdown of relationships as a result of sock puppet activity. YouTube needs to operate according to the same principles as, e.g. PayPal. An account must be verified with confirmation of an address, birth certificate, passport or driving licence. While users are not permitted to open an account by a false name, once an account is verified, the account holder may use a pseudonym in public, but still YouTube holds full details of their true identity. Anytime YouTube suspects an individual's personal details are false, the account will be instantly closed. With a requirement for verification, etc., sock puppet users could not so easily or instantly replace any closed accounts. Since PayPal has added advantage of bank details to support the validity of their account holders as genuine individuals, YouTube could ask for similar official verification from, e.g. a doctor or other such professional who can verify the person truly is who they claim to be. By adopting such a policy, YouTube continues to provide relative anonymity to people who, e.g. have suffered attack and do not wish to be publicly identified, and simultaneously ensure that account holders are not free to indiscriminately publish abusive, offensive material for malicious purposes that ignore or attack our human rights. Attacks against human rights are an attack against humanity. Naturally, YouTube will be loath to implement any such actions, as on the surface, those apparently would reduce the number of users, and this in turn would impact on the revenue they earn through advertising. On the other hand though, such action as proposed here will likely encourage more users who thus feel safer on that platform because they are no longer intimidated by fictitious characters. Also, with a valid and traceable identity behind every account, YouTube content will be less likely to share offensive, false, stolen or malicious information and material. Presently, YouTube is operating on very tenuous legal grounds, and most especially in case of otherwise law-abiding citizens suffering arrest and prosecution directly because they shared a YouTube video or content in their own uploads, and often in good faith that their actions are lawful and in public interest. Disturbingly, in case of sharing videos exposing crimes against children, people have been prosecuted for harassment of the very children they have exposed as at risk, and often on strength of lawful evidence they've witnessed via YouTube in the form of, e.g., police recorded interviews. Such evidence is not easy to casually dismiss as random material from the general public. Viewers become witness to crime. Lawful evidence is exposed to risk. The choice is to ignore or act in accordance with the severity of that risk. YouTube itself, however, acts merely as the gatekeeper. They are not interested as an organisation in assisting with identifying crimes and criminals exposed through their media platform. YouTube, it appears, can operate without care or conscience, and never mind if the public's conscience is suddenly heavily burdened due directly to YouTube content. Never mind if such people are subsequently suffering arrest and prosecution simply because YouTube has facilitated sharing of information which mainstream media are clearly too beholden to corruption to publish, and only because, if they did, resulting questions then echo directly in the face of government and other authorities who wish to keep the information hidden. It is precisely for purpose of public management certain crimes and criminals and their victims are ignored by mainstream medias by order of government on grounds of national security. It is claimed that certain news is so terrible it will cause major public unrest. However, suppose sometimes the public needs to display unrest, and only because they have good reason to feel restless. What use is peace if it depends on ignoring serious crimes against humanity? Any such peace is a falsehood, serving only subversive and/or purely financial interests. Like YouTube, the mainstream medias have a duty of care to the public, and indeed their own humanity. Is it ethical and lawful for a supposedly free press to abide by certain limitations on behalf of national security, when those requesting the news blockade are protecting the kind of criminals who pose a very severe level of harm to the most vulnerable members of the public, i.e. our children? Again, the golden rule insists that human rights receive precedence. National security can never rely on protecting organised criminals from arrest and prosecution. The point being, if national security is not upholding our human rights, then who exactly is the beneficiary of it? Can national security ignore a child's human rights to justice? No, it cannot, if that nation is to be lawfully recognised as a democracy, as defined by agreement of the United Nations and the European Union. YouTube is benefiting directly from the fact that the mainstream media are unscrupulously gagged. They continue to earn profits via advertising revenue earned directly on the strength of a news-hungry public, are free from responsibility from material deemed criminal, and also are free from responsibility for any personal damages caused by either videos on their channel and/or by comments and other YouTube activity by way of likes, dislikes or appropriation of personal video content. A question of responsibility. I am therefore challenging the legal validity of YouTube's present stance of accepting zero responsibility. Because sock puppet counts are a known entity and have been professionally identified as a largely abusive and often criminal group operating with malicious intent, the very fact that YouTube knowingly affords human rights to such entities is evidence of collusion to commit crime, in the sense that YouTube profits directly from the resulting apparent mass of users, which then increases revenue from advertising. Facilitating freedom of speech and expression cannot include fake identities, and by the very fact that YouTube affords human rights to fake identities is itself an abuse of human rights, and for the very reason that a fake identity cannot be held responsible for any crimes and damages it inflicts. Essentially, by permitting such account holders on strength of merely an email address, YouTube has created a dangerous and highly abusive environment that leaves the genuine individual users at risk, and which thereby affords greater freedom to non-accountable criminals. YouTube most especially presents a high risk to children, being as content is publicly viewable by non-account holders and all kinds of adult content is easily accessed by children. While parents bear most responsibility for monitoring their children's online activity, parents cannot be in all places at all times, and with most children possessing a cell phone, accessing the internet cannot be easily restricted. YouTube, therefore, needs to take urgent steps towards addressing the issues as exposed here. If sharing a YouTube video or its content is landing people in prison or with a conviction of offence, it is against human rights that prohibit discrimination, because a corporate entity and its freely accepted sock puppet accounts earning profits or power from the material deemed offensive are free from accountability, despite the fact it invites shares and likes, but the real people who share it are not free from police actions. How can that be? While freedom is welcomed, we need to be vigilant that the concept of freedom is not abused in order to afford greater power to those who fundamentally are opposed to the principles of human rights, and who in fact ignore and or abuse them toward criminal ends. Restrictions are not necessarily a bad thing if they're established in interests of public health and safety. YouTube needs to take responsibility and, like all public media, adopt the same principles of accountability for the material they permit to be published, insofar as that material may cause damage to viewers and sharers, i.e. provide a written warning stating that sharing videos may lead to criminal prosecution, coupled with a request to report any criminal or malicious material. Defending the righteous. In case of someone like Ken O'Keefe, a righteous individual and a popular spokesperson on behalf of human rights, those who feel threatened by his innate integrity, sense and sanity have regularly reported his video content as abusive or malicious because, e.g., he cites Zionists as the prime suspects for the crime of 9/11. Regularly, his videos have been removed by YouTube on behest of e.g. and or his share of revenue from associated advertising is denied. In such cases where the account holder is identified as a genuine individual person, YouTube needs to make sure that the complainants are not simply wishing to silence a witness and evidence to their crimes. Are Ken O'Keefe's concerns lawfully evidenced and or ethically or morally valid? Would denying Ken O'Keefe his rights to utilise freedom of speech and expression via YouTube mean that the public are otherwise misinformed and thus susceptible to crime? Is Ken O'Keefe inciting or inviting people to commit crime? Is the information he shares correct and important? Is Ken O'Keefe negating or supporting human rights? Are his detractors genuine persons presenting a valid complaint, or do they have direct connections to the very criminals Ken O'Keefe has exposed? Can anyone sharing evidence against, e.g., extremist faith groups be construed as anti-Islamic or anti-Christian or anti-Jew, when in fact the sharer is fully supporting non-extremist Jews, Muslims and Christians who form the public majority and themselves are threatened by those same extremists? YouTube needs to take an active role as a humane entity in defending and upholding human rights on strength of the Golden Rule, as well as hold itself responsible on behalf of its patrons and viewers, toward ensuring that non-extremist individuals are not silenced on behalf of promoting extremist, negligent professionals, governments, corrupt or corporations or criminals from public awareness and possible prosecution and other legal actions. The BBC, for example, could be construed as an extremist corporation because it promotes a wild conspiracy theory about 9/11 as fact, merely because American and British officials of the time decided to endorse those facts, which are now lawfully evidenced as false. Since the BBC's narrative discredits, e.g., the laws of physics, it is a simple matter for YouTube to discern between which party is credible and which party is not. Ken O'Keefe's use of publicly available BBC-created material as a means of presenting facts about a terrorist action is not a breach of copyright, because that material is evidence of a criminal conspiracy to misrepresent an act of terrorism. Addressing the crime of terrorism overrides laws related to copyright, which in turn are equally overridden in favour of upholding human rights, and directly because human rights are a foundation of public policy, and the golden rule is established to stoically defend the principles of public policy. Delivering balance. YouTube, as a public forum, has a lawful and ethical responsibility first and foremost to fully uphold human rights, and to be vigilant in making sure that those same rights are not afforded to fictitious persons through sock puppet accounts. Either YouTube's membership is genuinely huge and therefore legitimately earning revenue from that mass audience, or else YouTube's membership and viewers is not huge because a majority of users are not genuine persons but instead are false persons operating via multiple online accounts and identities. The irony is perfectly reflected by many non-Muslims' attitude to Muslim women who cover their faces. At least those women are real persons and they do have a lawfully valid identity, and yet many appear more concerned about a woman covering her face in public than they do about the variety of fake identities they regularly encounter or interact with online. Freedom comes with respect for human rights. Without that respect, there is mostly only greater freedom for crime and criminals who are enabled via YouTube to operate with impunity. As stated previously, some may choose to use a public pseudonym for their verified account, but nonetheless, YouTube has full details of that person as an individual who then can be held directly accountable for any criminal offences. As a species, we can no longer tolerate casual ignorance of our human rights. These exist for a reason, and that reason is to protect the public from crime and criminals. Either YouTube is going to fully honour those rights, or else it is a lawless entity supporting only the biggest powers, and thereby satisfying a corruption of law, serving the basic principle of might equals right to do as thy will. A perversion of law, which essentially endorses rape, theft and murder. By today's knowledge and standards, the existing approach in relation to identity of YouTube account holders is unacceptable. Certainly, a financial institution like PayPal would not accept it, so why should bodies like YouTube? People's health and safety is every bit as, if not more important than our finances. While costs of implementing the suggested alterations may initially appear steep, the reality is that in the long term, profits are more likely to increase in line with YouTube's increased credibility and resulting popularity among vast numbers who presently hold YouTube in low esteem and who as a result refrain from joining that platform. We live in perilous times, and there is a need for all hands on deck, and that includes those who operate YouTube. Most of our present-day problems are directly related to vast profits on strength of ignoring or denying human rights. Such profits cannot continue unabated forever. We need sustainability and accountability, and that includes each individual, and regardless of whether we are part of a corporation or an individual consuming the corporate product. The way things presently stand, YouTube as a corporate body has more in common with the unaccountable sock puppet account holders than it does with the general public and their authentic online identities. This situation is intolerable for intelligent, law-abiding citizens. All the information and recommendations presented here will doubtless appear like a huge headache for online companies like YouTube. However, YouTube has had a good run on strength of its currently shoddy rules for accounts, and also has earned huge sums in revenue as a direct result. That bubble has now burst, and the day of reckoning has arrived. YouTube will either be a leading company on behalf of upholding human rights, or else it will continue to provide favour to those who stand against them, as presently their current policies do. It's time we all got real. So, thank you for listening, and as I say, I'm sorry about my voice, and I know that I stammer a bit. I'm also dyslexic, so I have problems reading some words out sometimes, and I do have a slight speech impediment. So sincere thanks to those who've taken the time and trouble to listen to this, and if you agree, please share, and please bring it to YouTube's attention. So thank you to all, good night and God bless, and special thanks to Soothing Relaxation. I hope that you do enjoy watching this video with its music. Thank you.